Magyar Chronicles of the 13th century, Count of Vargoshi. The Magyar Chronicles of the 13th century tell us about the terrible fate of Count Vargosha, a sadist and adulterer who sent about 1,500 underage girls to the next world and committed suicide during an unbridled night in his own castle. Vargoshi was excommunicated from the church, anathematized, and all mention of him was subject to destruction. Vargosha's corpse, covered with unusual crumbs and ulcers that tore through the green skin immediately after his death, was tied with silver and bronze chains, sealed them, placed in an oak barrel, poured boiling resin over it, covered with sheet copper on top. Stitches were riveted, once again twisted with iron chains as thick as the hand of an adult man, then thrown to the bottom of a 40-meter stone well. The well was much deeper, but during the plague epidemic, raging to decades before the events described, the corpses of those who died from this merciless disease were thrown into it and poured with acids and alkalis. Two vats of molten tin were poured on top of a forged barrel. The well was filled to the top with water. The masonry was tightly hammered with a cast iron plug. Within a radius of up to 700 meters, every 2 steps, sharp aspen stakes were driven into the ground to a depth of half a meter to a meter. The population of the surrounding towns and villages breathed a sigh of relief. People woke up after a nightmarish monstrous sleep. Work was resumed in the fields, in the gardens. The first weddings began to be held again. Christian holidays were celebrated. But already on the 40th day after the death of the sadistic count, or rather, on the morning after the 40th night, with a memorable, in the courtyard of the local village church, parishioners found 7 mutilated female corpses with traces of violence on the body and crumbs and ulcers on the green skin. The necks of the dead were bitten through. The church fence was bent, broken, crosses knocked down. Apparently, the unfortunates sought salvation in the only reliable place, but nothing saved them. The villagers, rushing to the well, found that the ground around it seemed to be pierced by a giant plow in a spiral for many hundreds of meters. The stakes were fouled and split. When the plug was removed, it turned out that the water had completely gone down into the resulting voids. Splashes and scraps of solidified tin were found throughout the area for a long time. An hour later, a local priest was found in his own house. He was dead. His throat was squeezed by a heavy iron chain, the same one that wrapped around the barrel with the corpse of the count. The cross on the priest's chest was melted, and was a clot of silver flowing down his chest. 7 days later, during an unprecedented thunderstorm, the old castle cracked from a lightning strike, and then crumbled into stones. For 40 days, people saw a blue glow above it. According to eyewitnesses, it was the souls of the innocent murdered in the castle that soared to heaven. And yet the curse hung over the whole area for another 4 centuries. Not a night passed without someone disappearing from the nearby villages and towns. The well had long since collapsed, and an ugly deep crack had formed in its place. Over time, it was overgrown with moss, shrubs. The place became unrecognizable, but the terrible things were still going on. It is difficult to even imagine what an unthinkable surge of black energy from other dimensions was caused by the stormy, cruel activity of the sadistic Count Vargosha, who after death transformed into one of the fiercest vampire ghouls that mankind has ever known.